Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me here. It's a real honor, and I was very edified by your celebration of the Mass. That was beautiful with Ad Orientem and Eucharistic Prayer 1. It was just a wonderful experience to see this at a College Newman Center. So I want to tell you where I'm coming from so you can kind of put this in context. I'm one of the 3 administrators who runs the Graduate School of Christendom College. And the Christendom College is a very, very faithful Catholic college that is all in person, right? There's no online component to it whatsoever. It's all about Catholic community. And so there are just under 600 students who live together and experience what Christendom has to offer in the flesh. Whereas the graduate school is almost entirely online. We have students from 25 states and from many countries in the world. And our mission is just theology. We have only one major. We are a graduate school of theology. That is what we do. Theology is faith-seeking understanding. Everything that we do as Catholics must be elucidated in order for us to give defense of the hope that we have, right? And especially with so many bad ideas about what we have to say floating around, and so many bad ideas on the outside. A lot of it even starts with philosophy, which is why our graduate program is so intensive on the philosophical side. But what I'm bringing to you today is actually something from my ministry outside the college. The divine office is very important to me because when I was just getting engaged, I started praying it every single day, the entire office, and the Lord gave me the grace to pray the divine office every day without skipping any part of it from that time on when I was engaged until today. This has been 7 years now, and it's been a tremendous blessing. And it's weird because I am the kind of person who keeps falling off the bandwagon when it comes to daily Mass, fall off, rosary, fall off. You know, I'm not consistent with any of those things, I confess, right? But when it comes to the divine office, I just can't let go. Yeah, and this is an immense grace that's been given me. And so I'm a RCIA director outside of my work, and so I've incorporated this seminar into my RCIA curriculum at the very end, when they're already Christians. This is mystagogical catechesis that we give to Christians after they're already in. They've become Catholic. So now, how do you pray? How do you live the Christian life, especially pertaining to spirituality? This fits right in. I've taught this seminar to a class of deacons who are preparing a year away from their ordination to the diaconate, and it's on the syllabus of a catechist formation course, a 2-semester course that I teach for the graduate school. So this is like really personally important to me, and it's something I'm very passionate about. Having said that, this seminar takes over 2 hours, and it's very hands-on. But we can't do that here. So I've slashed it, just eviscerated all the details, and got it down to a really nice kind of overview of what the divine office is. So just to get the temperature of my audience, how many here have ever prayed the Liturgy of the Hours? That's awesome. Wow. You know how many Catholic audiences will have like 1 or 2 hands? Okay. How many prayed at least once a week? Okay, still good. How many prayed every single day? All right. Excellent, very nice. Okay, so definitely some people here who avail themselves of this devotion. And it is something that the Second Vatican Council in particular really meant to become a part of the life of the Church. So let's without further ado, let's talk about it. All right, so what we're going to talk about really briefly is the nature of the office, the history of the office, the structure of the individual hours. That part is going to be very tiny. And guidelines for recitation. Once again, I'm just giving the things that many people may not have heard that's kind of important, and the spirituality of the office. So, what is the divine office? So, the various names that we use for it: Liturgy of the Hours, Work of God, Canonical Hours, simply speaking, or the daily office, especially in the Anglican use tradition. It's often called the daily office. So with the Mass, the divine office forms the daily cycle of the prayer of the Church. When we think of liturgy, of public prayer of the Church, it's really 3 things. It's the holy sacrifice of the Mass, which is the source and summit, like the center of what we do as Christians. Then you have the canonical hours of the office, and then you have other small occasional liturgies pertaining to the various rites that are celebrated. But if you take the Mass and the divine office, that is basically the consistent liturgical cycle of the Church. And the two are often combined in some settings, especially in monastic settings. Formal Christian prayer, in its original form, is precisely this, as we'll find out from the history and from the Acts of the Apostles. So the recitation of Psalms, which is at the heart of the divine office, is is basically how Christians prayed when they were still this Jewish sect growing out of Judea, right? And it is the prayer of the church that sanctifies all hours of the day in all places where the church is present. So if you think about it, as the earth is spinning, and to say it a little more metaphorically, as the sun is spinning around the earth, we have in different places priests and monks and nuns and lay people waking up and saying this office in the morning, in the daytime, in the evening. So every day, this is the entire church at prayer, sanctifying all the hours of the day. I'm going to quote the Second Vatican Council, Sacrosanctum Concilium, verbatim here regarding this. By tradition going back to early Christian times, the divine office is devised so that the whole course of the day and night is made holy by the praises of God. Therefore, when this wonderful song of praise is rightly performed by priests and others who are deputed for this purpose by the Church's ordinance, or by the faithful praying together with the priest in the approved form, then it is truly the voice of the bride addressed to her bridegroom. It is the very prayer which Christ himself, together with his body, addresses to the Father, right? I could not put it in any more lofty terms to kind of describe what the divine office is. This is Sacrosanctum Concilium, the Constitution on the Liturgy of the Second Vatican Council. So how do we get this thing? We can look at the history of the divine office from, first of all, the Bible. In the Jewish worship, the Psalms were central. We can see even in the way that the Psalms are labeled in the Psalter for the Korahites or things like that. These are specific liturgical instructions, or Sela, that mysterious Sela. Or is it a musical instruction? Like, what is that pops up in the Bibles? This all has to do with the fact that Psalms were liturgical poems or songs that were used in worship. So they're very important to the Jewish people. And remember, what our Lord Jesus Christ does for us is he opens for us the scriptures. So the Hebrews were praying the Psalms, but they did not yet have the whole import of what the Psalms were saying. Now, when the Lord Jesus opened the scriptures for us and gave to the church the treasure of the complete revelation of God, he being the Word, God has nothing else to say other than Jesus Christ to us. In that complete picture, we can see the Psalms unveiled for what they truly mean. So when we pray the Psalms Christologically, when we hear the voice of Christ and the voice of the church in the Psalms, we become aware of their full import. So, in the Acts of the Apostles, we have situations where Christians are doing just that. And I'm going to quote some scriptures here pertaining to particular hours of the divine office. So, first of all, the third hour. That's 9 a.m. Nowadays it's called terce. For these men are not drunk, as you suppose, since it is only the third hour of the day. This is Peter explaining that they were at prayer in the upper room where the Holy Spirit came at Pentecost, right? He is explaining to everybody who is hearing all their languages being spoken by a bunch of Galileans. This is actually not drunkenness. This is the Spirit. Moving right along to the 6th hour. The next day, as they were on their journey and coming near the city, Peter went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. So Peter goes up to the housetop to pray at the 6th hour, as a specific hour of Jewish prayer. Peter and John in the 9th hour. Now Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour. The 9th hour is the hour of prayer. And last but not least, Paul and Silas at midnight. But about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. So these are all instances in the Acts of the Apostles where we have these indirect references to the Christian observance of the Jewish tradition of praying with the Psalms. And of course, the Christians are filled as they are with the Spirit, understand the Psalms very, very deeply for their true meaning. So this continues in the church, the use of the Psalms, and takes on new form around the time of the rise of monasticism with the Desert Fathers in the 3rd century and onwards from that, when monks really take it to the next level and start reciting the entire Psalter in a day. So 150 Psalms, this is hours of recitation that they're doing every single day as a part of their devotion. This works for the Desert Fathers. But when we get to Saint Benedict and the other monastic uses that arise, including in the East, people realize that if monks actually spent every day saying all the 150 psalms, they will not have a lot of time for work. So all sorts of rules arise that kind of break the psalms down. The two that we have from antiquity in the West are Saint Benedict's. If you ever read the book called The Rule of Saint Benedict, which is a wonderful book, by the way, even for lay people to read, you can see that he describes the Psalms and how they're broken down in his schema. And he says, and by the way, if the abbot wants to do it differently, that's fine. But he breaks it down in a particular way. And what's interesting is that he refers to a Roman use that was present around the same time. So we know from him and from other sources that the Romans had their own schema. And we find that Roman schema kind of perseveres until around 1911 as basically the form of the Western office. So the Psalm is broken down into a week. 1 week you go through the entire Psalter. So in the monasteries, in order to be able to recite the office, this was a rather complex endeavor because you didn't just have the Psalms, right? You also had lots of prayers, and you had various readings, and you had antiphons, which were these things that everybody repeated between the verses and things like that. You also had the gospel, so you needed several different books that were managed by the hebdomadary. It's the person who is managing this and kind of putting it together for the monks as they're praying. You have the antiphonary, and you have the book of the Gospels, and you have the Psalter, etc. When you get to the Middle Ages, these things start appearing called the breviaries. And breviaries are compilations that allow you to pray with just one book, right? So Middle Ages is when we first see these inventions where you are having the office compiled not by separate books holding the different components, but being all put into one. When things start to get really formalized is with the Council of Trent. Trent was the great response of the Catholic Church to the Protestant rebellion. And this was when so many different truths of Christian doctrine were questioned. And so what the Council of Trent did was said, well, no, this is so, this is so, this is so. If you look at the centuries of Christian history, doctrine develops usually in response to bad ideas, in response to heresies. That most ecumenical councils, not Vatican II, but most ecumenical councils are addressing one or another error of their time. So what are we looking here at Trent? In Trent, St. Pius V puts out a bull Quod a nobis, which suppresses a particular breviary that he found objectionable in Christendom out of the many breviaries in circulation, and promulgates a specific one that he thinks is good. And that becomes the breviary of the entire Western Church. So for the first time, there is a single divine office that is open to the entire Western Christendom. It is in Latin, and it becomes a matter for all sorts of settings of music and all sorts of other things in Christendom. It becomes kind of this institutional point of union between different religious orders and so on. Some of the religious orders get to keep the peculiarities of their offices, the ones that can demonstrate their antiquity, but many actually transfer to Pius V breviary. So what's interesting is that it is not the Second Vatican Council that initiates the tremendous reform of the breviaries around that time, but in fact it is Saint Pius X in the early 20th century. So he decides that the Psalter is way too burdensome as it exists at the time, and so he really pares it down so that you do not have any psalm repeating like on different days. So every psalm occurs only once a week. It's a complete rewrite of the way that the older schema worked from the time of Benedict and the old Roman schema. And this is the breviary of St. Pius X. He also slashes a lot of patristic readings that were just too long and impractical, and takes out some of the redundancies. And this trend continues after St. Pius X. Which is spurred in part by the liturgical movement, which was kind of an ad fontes movement to restore the Roman liturgy in its full beauty and maybe take down some of the accretions that have occurred in it over time. So we arrive at Second Vatican Council, and the Council Fathers were very enthusiastic about the liturgical movement, and they wanted to continue the work that was going on in the breviary with the several Supreme Pontiffs editing it since St. Pius X. And they come out with specific instructions on how this is to be done in Sacrosanctum Concilium, which I quoted to you earlier. Pope St. Paul VI, pictured here, in 1970, takes the instructions of Sacrosanctum Concilium and comes out with Laudis Canticum, which is the document that promulgates the new breviary as we know it today. 4 volumes, lots more scripture, much wider selection of church fathers as opposed to just several church fathers repeating again and again. So wonderful reforms of the Second Vatican Council actually implemented in Laudis Canticum. So some of the examples of what he did there. He took the 1-week cycle and split it into 4 weeks that you all know. So now we do not have to do it all in 1 week. If you want like a point of reference, the old office takes well over an hour to piously recite in a day. Whereas the new one, you can do it in somewhere around 35, 40 minutes if you go really slowly, but you can actually do it quite a bit faster than that. So for busy priests, this was huge, the new Psalter that was offered. He also changed the reading, so there was a lot more scripture, right? The scripture readings were very limited, and now there was lots and lots of scripture in the Divine Office, especially in the first reading. And then in the second readings, lots more church fathers were added, especially Eastern fathers and some other conciliar readings and so on. So the breadth became tremendous of what you get exposed to in the office. Very importantly, vernacular was allowed to be used. Before, one of the things that prevented laity from praying the office more often than not was that it was in Latin. And so even if you had a parallel translation, it was an extra step to recite it piously, to fully understand it, unless you're blessed with a knowledge of Latin. Nowadays, you can just do it in English, in your own language, which is very straightforward. And he suppressed the hour of prime, which used to exist until then. And he also got the office of readings moved to any point in the day. So before, the longest hour by far, matins, had to be said first. And so until you said matins, you wouldn't be able to say the rest of it. And so priests sometimes would delay their recitation of the office in the day because, well, I don't have 30, 40 minutes to recite matins right now. Well, this problem was solved by putting office of readings anywhere. So you can just start with morning prayer, 5-10 minutes, right? And then when you have a proper long chunk of time, you can say, okay, I'm going to sit down and recite the office of readings. So that's kind of the history up to this point. So now to the structure of the office. And you guys know this because I saw all those hands raised, so I'm not going to go deeply into this. But a few notes. Office of readings used to be called matins, as I mentioned. Latin is officium lectionis and matutinum. In the monastic setting, it is sometimes called vigils. It is expanded with a gospel reading and sometimes other things as well to make a much longer office that is often recited in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. Morning prayer, lauds, remains what it was, but prime, a secondary morning prayer, was suppressed. That one is an interesting history. It was the very last hour instituted, and St. Jerome gives us the story that it was because there were lazy monks in Jerusalem who would go to sleep after lauds and before their work, whereas they were supposed to sleep only a little bit and then get up and do some reading and stuff like that. They would actually just sleep through the whole thing. And so monasteries in Jerusalem instituted the hour of prime to make the lazy monks wake up. And that apparently is the genesis of the hour of prime. So the hour of prime was suppressed at the Second Vatican Council. Daytime prayer was combined in such a way that you only needed to recite one of them without redundancy. So you could fulfill the entire obligation by doing just one, terce, sext, or none, either of those, any of those. Then evening prayer as before, and night prayer. So that's you guys more or less know that. This is about the structure of the hours themselves. I'm not going to go too deeply into this for the sake of time, but I'm sure you're all familiar with these divisions. What's interesting here is that the lauds and vespers are parallel. So lauds and vespers have parallel structures, just like they did in the old office, albeit in a different way. The real center, by the way, of morning and evening prayer are the gospel canticles. When I teach our CIA, I really make a big deal about the fact that the church prays Mary's Magnificat every single evening. If you think about the significance of that moment, of what's happening when Magnificat is being recited, the forerunner, the last of the Old Testament prophets, John the Baptist, in the womb just recognized his Savior, and this was confessed by his mother, who is Mary's cousin, and now the Mother of God says this prayer. Like, if you just dwell on that, it's incredible. And so we say the Magnificat every single day in the evening as part of our evening prayer. And another thing I would mention is that the intercessions were brought back. So intercessions were the same every single day in the very old office. They were called the preces, and then they were removed at some point in the 20th century, and reserved only to particular penitential days, particular Wednesdays and Fridays. They were restored in the Second Vatican Council with this reform, but they're now different every time. So you see a great variety of intercessions that occur throughout the office. All right, so daytime prayer, pretty straightforward structure. And Compline. One thing about Compline I want to mention, and something you don't get this in the breviary, but it's useful to know. There was a traditional schedule for the 4 Marian antiphons that was used in the old office. It was in the rubrics, but it is in the rubrics no longer. So Alma Redemptoris Mater, for example, we think of it as the Advent Marian antiphon, but actually it's supposed to go through up to the presentation of the Lord. Ave Regina Celorum doesn't start with Lent, but starts immediately on presentation and continues until the Triduum. Regina Caeli traditionally went to Trinity Sunday because Pentecost was an octave. So that was still part of Easter, and so you would still have the recitation of Regina Caeli an extra week compared to how it is done now. And then Salve Regina for ordinary time. From that point until Advent of next year. So that's kind of a cool fact. All right. So some recitation guidelines that are useful. It's important to know for your own sake that you do not have to follow the rubrics on posture as lay people reciting the office unless you're doing it in common. So wherever you are, whether you're walking or sitting or anything like that, you can recite the office as you are. However, the rubrics request that you still observe what pertains to the sign of the cross. So when you're supposed to make the sign of the cross, please do that. The sign of the cross is as follows. It's when Lord, open my lips is with a thumb over your lips. And then at the beginning of all the other hours, God come to my assistance. First verse of the 3 gospel canticles at Lauds, Vespers, and Compline. Then at the end of Lauds and Vespers, at the May the Lord bless us. And then May the all-powerful Lord grant a restful night and a peaceful death at Compline, at the end, right before the Marian antiphon. One more thing to remember about the guidelines is that it is a vocal prayer, and the words should at least be formed by lips, and every syllable should be enunciated. There's quite a lot of writing on this pertaining to the obligation of clerics from before the Second Vatican Council, and what fulfills and does not fulfill a cleric's obligation to say the divine office. And this is very relevant, is that you have to at least form it with your lips. Not as lay people, but as clerics or consecrated persons. Okay. So who should pray the office? First of all, bishops, priests, and most religious are bound to recite the entirety of the office between midnight and midnight of a given day. So that is the actual guidelines that pertain to clergy and to religious. Office of readings may be anticipated after Vespers on the preceding day. So that's a nice convenient thing if you know you have a really big day coming up. Compline should be the last prayer of the day, even if it's after midnight. That's a nice relaxation that is there in the new rubrics. And some religious and priests are actually bound to recitation and choir. So in order for them to do it validly, unless they're excused by their superior, they have to do it in common, in community. Deacons and some consecrated persons are bound to recite Lauds and Vespers daily. And this can actually differ by bishop's conference. This is the law as it is here in the United States. Laity are encouraged to join themselves to the prayer of the church. The Sacrosanctum Concilium urges public celebration of Lauds, Vespers, and Compline, especially Vespers on Sundays and major feasts. And you see that this call of the Second Vatican Council has not been heard in many parishes. Like there are still lots of parishes that do not have common celebration of the divine office. So hopefully that is something that can eventually change. All right. So as far as the books that are used, obviously the 4-volume is the standard, and there is a 6-volume in Latin that is now in print, if you are ever interested. It's interesting that Sacrosanctum Concilium asks clerics to always pray it in Latin. So not that they have to, clearly, but it's in the document there. There's Christian prayer, which gives you just Lauds, Vespers, and Compline. And shorter Christian prayer is a parish tool that I would steer clear of unless you're doing it in a parish that happens to use it, because it doesn't have the text for many of the feasts. Some online tools I would mention. iBreviary. Does anybody use the app for this? Right. So I was coming here today to give this talk, and I didn't bring my breviary, incredibly, because I use the app when I travel. It doesn't even occur to me to bring my breviary. So there we go. And if any of you are interested in the old offices, not just the way it was in the 1960, 1962, but going back to Trent, the free app Brevarium Meum, Brev Meum for short, you can download that, and it gives you the Latin with English parallel as well as other language parallels in different versions of the office going all the way back to Trent. So it's absolutely fascinating if you want to see side by side the different ways that the office was used. All right. So organization, you guys clearly know this because you use it, but this is basically how the breviary is organized. And let's see. Okay, now we're going to slow down a little bit. So spirituality of the divine office. First of all, it represents a response of the church to St. Paul's request that we pray without ceasing, right? So not literally, but it is something that allows us to constantly recenter our day in Christ if we just keep coming back to it and back to it. As something useful that you can all look at, if you're interested in seeing how this is practiced, take a look at some horariums of monasteries or even seminaries. Like, how do they break it down during the day? And you will see how it is actually used by the church to sanctify the entire day. It is the voice of the church in prayer, right? So you know that what you're praying is being prayed everywhere else at the same time, and probably in roughly the same way, which is just a very edifying thought. Saint Hippolytus, pertaining to praying at night, has this to say: around midnight, rise and wash your hands with water and pray. If you are married, pray together. So I do not necessarily recommend this, and I think if I asked my wife to do that, like waking her up at midnight after she just put the baby down, that would not go over well. But in general, if you rise in the middle of the night and pray, that's a really cool thing, especially if you're woken in the middle of the night by something dark, like a nightmare or a temptation or anything like that. Fleeing to the office is an amazing remedy for all sorts of things. So definitely recommend that. Then there are some things that we can think about pertaining to the different hours. So, for example, Lauds, which is prayed right at sunrise, evokes in us thoughts of the resurrection, right? Resurrection and actually the second coming of Christ, right? We see the sun rising, and it is our response to the grace of a new day. We survived the night, yay, right? Terce usually refers to the descent of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit descended at 9 o'clock, as we know from Acts of the Apostles. So that's pretty clear. Sext is when our Lord was crucified. Then noon is when he died. And actually this refers to also the noonday devil, that kind of afternoon sloth feeling. Even 5-Hour Energy gets this. Have you ever seen these 2:30 feeling commercials from 5-Hour Energy? Oh, that 2:30 feeling. Or is it a 4:30 feeling? I think it's a 2:30 feeling. I think they get this right. But that's the noonday devil, right? When our motivation just seeps out of us. And prayer can help us recenter ourselves and kind of reignite the zeal in doing what we should be doing. By the way, why is noon in English noon? This is a cool story. So in the early church, fasting was until after sundown, right? So in the first millennium of the church, basically you fast until sundown on fast days, then you have the one meal. That was relaxed in the Middle Ages to 3 p.m., which was the hour of noon. But because monks were getting really, really tired and hungry, it kept getting pushed back in practice until it was roughly 12. So noon was actually recited at 12 so that monks could have their meal earlier. So it became the noon meal, and so that's where we get the word noon. You can look this up, I'm not kidding. So there we go, that's noon right there, hungry monks. All right. Vespers, of course, is contemplation. There's a beautiful meditation on this by Saint Bernard, I think, of Clairvaux, in the Divine Office itself, concerning how Vespers is an hour that disposes us to the kind of contemplation that we might experience after a long day, when we are tired and our minds can rest in the Lord. And then Compline is the preparation for death. None of us know if the sun is going to rise the next day. So that's something that the Compline is very, very clear about, right? The theme of death and the theme of trusting in the Lord, commending our spirit to Him, is very much a theme of Compline. All right. So last thing, some practical tips. First of all, if you're going to do this, find the right place to pray. So to a point. You can pray the Divine Office everywhere, and some people are kind of weird about it. Like I, for example, really like to walk and recite the Divine Office outside sometimes, which you might trip and injure yourself. But if you do not, then it really works out. Having a prayer corner in the house is absolutely wonderful. This is not mine, but I do have a prayer corner with icons of the saints to whom I have devotion, and to whom my family members have devotion, and I have like a candle there and all sorts of religious books, and it's like a place where you can go and really center yourself in prayer. And of course, if you can visit the Blessed Sacrament, nothing beats that. So coming here to say the Divine Office is the thing to do if you're able to. Try to match the hours of the day to, like the hours of the liturgy to the hours of the day to which they refer. It is absolutely permissible to say it all in one go to fulfill your obligation if you're obligated to recite the Divine Office. But if you're not obligated and you can just do it whenever, or even if you are obligated, try to say it when it's supposed to be said, because then it'll make more sense. Like if you wait until the evening and then read about the first rays of light lighting up the sky, you're like, That was a few hours ago, right? So it's not as relatable. Then pray before praying. There was just a great homily in the Office of Readings last week from St. Charles Borromeo, where he's saying, all these clerics complain that they can't concentrate when they recite Divine Office, and all sorts of distractions flood into their heads, and same thing for Mass. It's like, well, what did they do? What were they doing in the sacristy beforehand, right? Did they pray to recollect themselves? And this is really true. If you try to recollect yourself prior to the recitation of the Divine Office, that 1 minute of spiritual effort can make the experience very different. Because if you just run in there, God, come to my assistance, it's like, okay, by the time you're recollected, you'll be past the Psalms. And you're like, what just happened, right? So definitely recollect yourself prior to beginning. Then another kind of point of spirituality is we can think of the Psalms as us speaking to God, and then listening to Him in the readings. So that's kind of a cool way of looking at it, because in the Psalms we can hear the voice of either ourselves or Christ or the church. And some of them are really not relatable to your particular situation. Like on Friday nights, we pray, like you might have had a great Friday night, maybe you went out drinking, this and that. Then you come back to night prayer and it's like, Lord, I call for help by day, I cry at night before you, right? Like this really, really dark psalm, okay? You can realize at that point, in all seriousness, that somewhere in the world, the church is persecuted and someone is really experiencing this right now in the body of Christ. And pray on their behalf, right? It truly is the voice of the church at any given point. So that's a nice way of looking at it. And then in the readings, of course, it's almost like spiritual reading. You can actually make it spiritual reading by taking your time with short readings in the hours. Remember that this is about Jesus and the church, right? So Psalms can be unsettling. Some of the Psalms even have things that sound like curses. Now, the 3 Psalms that are most direct about the curses, though they've been taken out of the new office. They're actually not in there, funnily enough. Because when the office was intended for the laity, they're like, well, some lay people are not going to do their homework. They're going to read this, and they're like, so that's what we're going to do. We got to curse people who are bad, right? So they may misinterpret the import of those Psalms. Or I'm not sure, maybe that was the reasoning, I don't know. But basically, those psalms have been removed. But still, some of the psalms are quite unsettling as to their content, like, the dogs will lick up the blood of our foes, right? We have to take this in a spiritual sense, right? We're talking, who is our enemy? Who are our real enemies? The other people who we happen to be at war against or anything like that? Of course not. Our real enemies are the demons, the ones who are in the way of salvation, not only to ourselves, but to our enemies, for whom, by the way, we're supposed to pray. So that's a nice way of looking at that when you run into some of those more difficult pieces of the Psalms. Speak aloud and sing when practical. So if you speak aloud, then you are actually respecting the nature of the office as vocal prayer. So if you are in private, please avail yourself of this. And of course, reciting in common is privileged. And then sing when practical. Some people are uncomfortable with their own singing, but God is very happy no matter how bad it is, right? So just let it out, right? Go into a room, close the door, buy some insulation, whatever you need. But I'm just kidding. No, just sing, right? And last but not least, meditate on the reality of that in which you are participating. That's the point that I keep coming back to. When you recite the divine office, you are participating in what everybody else in the Western Church, and in a different way in the Eastern churches, is doing, right? So this is an incredible privilege to be connected to that. When I give this talk to lay people, like in the catechist formation or especially RCIA, I assume that roughly 75%, in my cynicism I assume this, will never pick up breviary in their lives, right? Because it is still not taken hold in the church as the prayer of the entire people of God. But when I see so many hands raised, like tonight, it gives me hope. So see what you can do about making this the prayer of the people of God. Make it a part of your life if you think that this is something that God calls you to do, and tell other people about it. So I think it's a really fruitful thing that you can do for yourself and for the church. So that's the divine office part. Before I go into my Christendom stuff, I want to ask if there are any questions. Father?
Oh, yeah, asking for a friend. If there were somebody that prayed the traditional breviary, and the rule apparently in the USCCB is that you have to pray Lauds and Vespers, but when B16 published about the traditional mass and saying it and the breviary, it went according to the old rules. Will this friend of mine have to pray the full breviary every day? Would it be bound by mortal sin to pray all the like it used to be, or could it be just Vespers and Lauds?
Right, a very, very good question. I'm going to give a full answer to this because this is multiple levels. So in Summorum Pontificum, the Pope Benedict did not address the way that this affects obligations of deacons. If we look at the way that deacons are formed in those seminaries that follow traditional rule, even from the time that they're subdeacons, which is no longer even recognized as a major order, you have the obligation to pray the entire office. However, nowadays, the obligation for deacons is so kind of tenuous that it's actually, I think, enforced locally, unless I'm mistaken. So Lauds and Vespers is in some places, but the universal law, like in canon law, mentions that deacons and other consecrated persons are bound by what they're bound to where they are, right? So canon law is very non-specific about this. So that's why my impression, personally, is that if Lauds and Vespers in the new office is what he's being asked to do, then Lauds and Vespers in the traditional breviary is still fine. And by the way, another relevant question is Summorum Pontificum pertaining to the legitimacy of reciting the old office abrogated by Traditionis Custodes of Pope Francis? I don't think so, because Traditionis Custodes does not mention the divine office. So I'm wondering if it's still in effect in that respect, and that you can still use the old office for fulfilling your personal obligation. So at least I certainly hope so on behalf of all the priests who are doing it. Fingers crossed. So
yeah. Wasn't it, though, after Sacrosanctum Concilium, a clarification by B16 that he said all that it pertains? Was it a posterior document? He said all that pertains to...
Right.
All the law that pertained to it still pertains? In other words, you can't have altar girls
Right.
in the traditional, even if you could for the new Nova, so that type of like.
Absolutely, yeah. All that law pertains. But when it comes to a law that, for example, binds deacons in their lives, that is outside liturgical norms, I think. Right. So I think like what they are required to do as deacons may not be regulated by those same norms. I'm not sure that the law applies in that way, but I may be wrong because I'm not a canonist and I'm making this up. So let's I have one of our professors is a canon lawyer, and maybe I can bug him about this question.
Awesome.
That's a really good one. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah, what was the Selah? The Selah thing?
Selah, right. In the Psalms, there is an obscure Hebrew term. It is rendered in the King James and in some other translations as Selah, S-E-L-A-H. It pops up in the beginning of some Psalms. I don't have any numbers for you, but several Psalms have just Selah in the beginning. We don't know what the Hebrew word is. The prevailing opinion is that it is a musical instruction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also, would you say it's preferable to sing it, or to say it out loud, or to pray it in the church? Like if you had to choose between the two, like you could
Right.
pray it quietly to yourself in the church, or you could say it out loud by yourself.
Right. The whole out loud thing is just kind of a spiritual tool, whereas being in the church is being in the real presence of our Lord Jesus Christ. So I would say that if you are in the church whispering it or even just moving your lips for the divine office before the Blessed Sacrament, that will trump any other considerations. Posture, just about anything else. So yeah, obviously the church is the privileged place for prayer no matter what, and we have to be considerate to other people and not sing at them. So yeah.
Thank you.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions?
I had a question about the psalm prayer that's in the New Liturgy of the Hours. What is the significance of that, and how do you
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. See, these are the little technicalities that are in the 2-hour seminar that I cannot go into here, but I will address that one with a vengeance. So the psalm prayers that are there in the breviary were never meant to be there in the breviary. They were supposed to be in an appendix. They are like a accretion that is going to go away in the next edition of the breviary in English that's going to come out in the next couple of years. I think Bishop said that 2024 it should be finished, so 2026 we might actually get it in print, God willing. And it's going to have a better translation of just about everything, and the psalm prayers are going to be gone. So I don't even notice them anymore. And like when people ask me about the parts of the breviary, they will ask me, like, why are you glossing over these psalm prayers? Like, you're explaining to me everything step by step in this seminar, but you're glossing over the psalm prayers because they're invisible to me, because they shouldn't have been there, right? So I wouldn't use them. The translations are really bad. You know, I hope they're not faithful to the Latin because they're really bad. So there we go. All right. Thank you. That's a great question, Augustine. Anything else?
Then I had another question
Please.
about the before Pius V's sort of
Quota nobis.
Yeah, yeah. What was the common language in the Roman Rite at least still Latin to pray the breviary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think around subsequent to St. Jerome's translation, Latin gradually became the lingua franca of the Western Church, whereas in the early church everything was in Greek, including in Rome. And so at that point Latin really takes over, and it becomes the universal language of praying the breviary. Yeah, so it's Latin all the way. Even now, the typical edition, the standard edition, is in Latin. Sacrosanctum Concilium asks clerics to pray it in Latin, if possible. I say if possible. The Sacrosanctum Concilium does not make that stipulation. And then they also have this. The interesting thing is that there are permissions with the vernacular to pray it in your own language. For example, there is now the Anglican Use Office, right? So the Anglican Use, they took the office of the Common Prayer Book and Catholicized it so that Anglican Use Catholics can use that. And that, by the way, is a wonderful office. If you want to look into an alternative way. Sorry, what's up?
No, I'm just into that right now.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
My
Yeah.
family goes to the ordinariate.
You don't say. How cool.
And so I'm interested in
Okay.
that kind of.
So I spent a whole year experimenting with that office. I did it for 1 year. Never been to an Anglican Use Mass in my life, but I've done the full study of their office. fascinating. So yeah, if you want like a different way of doing it, please look into it. It's definitely worth your time exploring. The Psalter, the language, the Coverdale Psalter, super cool. That is older than King James. So enjoy the language. All right. Yeah, thank you. Very good question. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Father.
Martyrology.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. In the old office, one of the integral parts was reading the Roman Martyrology, which is the book that contains all the saints who are liturgically honored in the Roman Catholic Church. That's what the Roman Martyrology is. It is being expanded to this day, and it's a really cool book. Unfortunately, you cannot get a post-conciliar copy. For some reason, they're not sold in a single volume English translation. You can find some online resources that give you the information, but I'm not sure of their reliability. So you can buy martyrologies that are current through the Second Vatican Council. So those are readily available, and they're very informative. In the old office prior to Vatican II, the martyrology was said as part of the hour of prime. So prime would interrupt. There would be the reading of martyrology, and then prime would continue. And the reason is that prime actually was made up of two separate hours. One kind of the first hour with the Psalms, and then a chapter hour, which was the part where the monks were assigned their work. And so because of that original meaning of the hour of prime, it's split by the martyrology traditionally. And it used to be an integral part of the office, although, curiously, clerics bound to the office were never obligated to recite the martyrology, that they could actually skip over it, say, precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of his saints, without mentioning any of the martyrs, and move right through it. You know, obviously, if you ever try to pray the old office in Latin, using the app I mentioned, Brev Meum, or anything like that, I definitely recommend reading the martyrology, because the stories are incredible. It's like a sentence or two per martyr, and you can learn so much from that. Just if you read that every day, that would be a very edifying. So, it kind of makes sense, Father?
Liturgically honored? There's like 20 saints in there.
That's right. So those are the options. A priest is welcome to liturgically honor any one of them, as long as that saint is not impeded by a mandatory memorial or a higher-ranking feast.
Oh, right. So you
Yeah.
can do anyone. If there's just nothing, you just plug any one of those guys.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So you're absolutely allowed to do that. Yeah. You can look this up. But on a given day in the Roman martyrology, there are often mandatory ones, like the obligatory memorial. You can't do anything about that, including a particular church one, like for the U.S. calendar. But then if there's an optional memorial, or if there is nothing in the general calendar or the U.S. calendar, then you can liturgically celebrate one of the saints that's in there.
Change with the change of the calendar.
Sorry?
Did the martyrology change with the change of the calendar?
I have no idea. I honestly don't know. The saints that are mentioned there in the old one, they're still using the old lists, so they're on all of their old dates. Like when you read it, they're all on their old dates. So I actually have never seen a post-conciliar martyrology, because they're not published. So I don't know if they shuffled them around somehow. But the thing is that the dates pertain to the date of their death, usually, or something like that, even for those that are not martyred. So they will often say something, this is the day when this person was martyred, and we remember them on that other day. So the martyrology will actually say that we remember them on that other day, but they still remember them on the day of their birth into the better life, right, which martyrdom and so on. Yeah. Right. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So I have a copy of the Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I was wondering, how did that arise, and like what place, like what's its relationship with the Liturgy of the Hours? Like, do religious use it, or yeah? Right.
It is used as an extra devotion, basically. So I'm not aware that it is ever used instead of the Divine Office, but it can be used in conjunction. It's kind of, I'm not sure how it arose, to be honest, but I am aware that it is kind of similar to how there were multiple offices that could be said, and sometimes had to be said, on the same day. That's where, like, if you look at feast ranks before the reforms of the 1950s, even before Vatican II, you have things like doubles. So there are simple feasts, there are doubles, and there are semi-doubles. And those ranks refer to the fact that the office had to be duplicated for some of the feasts, where there were, for example, 2 really major saints on a given day, or there was an interaction in the calendar between a movable feast and something from the proper of saints, where you would actually have 2 offices. And a really dramatic example of that still existed all the way up to Vatican II is the Office of the Dead. So the Office of the Dead was always recited as a second office with its psalms attached to the office of the day. There was a particular transition that you made, and you actually went right on with invitatory, Psalm 95, once again, all over again for the office of the dead and so on. So that's kind of interesting. But there we go. I'm not familiar beyond that analogy with the genesis of the little office, but I'm not aware that it ever replaces the divine office, properly speaking. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. You were raising your fingers. My bad. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Cool. Okay. So the last part I want to talk about is the whole Christendom thing, right? So I'm very blessed to be part of the Christendom community. I didn't get to go to college there. I went to a large secular university in Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University, and as a Catholic, I remember having to really fight my professors about doctrine, because I was a religious studies and psychology major, and a lot of my professors were not only not Catholic, but quite hostile to the Catholic faith. And so lots of really, really great discussions, but my formation ended up being basically my priest, who was awesome, some good friends, and me reading things online, right? So Catholic Answers, things like that, really helpful. So that's not quite adequate, right? And so I ended up getting my master's from Christendom, and that gave me the formation that I've been using ever since to do stuff right, like catechesis and all that. But the fact of the matter is that at most secular universities, you do not have the opportunity to have the kind of formation academically that you can at places like Christendom College or Franciscan University of Steubenville or other really faithful Catholic colleges that pull no punches in explaining Catholic doctrine and have not caved to the spirit of the times. So what Christendom College Graduate School has done is we have a program called Christendom At, which a lot of you are familiar. How many here are in the Christendom At class? Anybody? Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so a number of people here. So thank you all for being part of this. Anybody who is not a part of this so far, I encourage you to get on board. These are classes either for credit or audit, right? And the kind of formation you get there is basically what you would get at a place like Christendom, compressed. You're getting it, and you're getting it from the graduate school. You're not getting it with other undergrads. You're getting it from graduate school professors who are able to really, really answer your deepest questions about whatever you really, really want to go in depth into. If you're doing it for credit, your work will be evaluated at a high college/graduate level, so you can kind of see whether your writing on the subject of theology is up to par. So that's always nice. Really, what it's about is, you cannot go into the world expecting to be able to address people who are formed in the philosophy and the worldview that's out there, who have gone to philosophy schools and so on, with just knowing the Catechism of the Catholic Church and things like that, right? You have to go deeper than that, because a lot of what we believe, what underlies it, is being denied. The very philosophical foundations, such as the fact that, well, truth exists, truth is knowable, right? These things are undermined in the modern world. So in order to be able to stand up to that, it is very useful to have an academic level formation. So whatever your major is, and whatever you're planning to do in life, while you have the opportunity here at Platteville, avail yourselves of the classes offered through the Christendom At program. Our partnership with the Newman Center here and Father John has made it tremendously affordable to you compared to what other Christendom At students have to pay. So I sincerely recommend that you avail yourselves of that and do your best to take advantage of it while you're here. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, once you get your bachelor's degree, you're welcome to come and study with us for your master's after you come out of here. Now, our master's is all online, and it's designed for working people. You can attend in person if you want to. It's hybrid, but you can do it online as a full-time working person. That's what it's designed to do. That's who it's for. most of our students, the majority of our students, are working adults, either working in ministry, like Catholic school teachers, directors of religious education, things like that, or they are people like, we have a NASA engineer and we have a CIA employee and things like that. There are people who are doing all sorts of interesting things, who care about their faith and who do things on the side, like catechesis or some other kind of ministry that's going to that's going to allow them to take it to the next level, basically, right? So I definitely invite you to do that. And while we're at it, if any of you are juniors or before, you can get our master's degree in 1 year of full-time study if you spend the summer with us between your junior and senior year. So that's an option. If you want to come to Christendom for 6 weeks and hang out with us and study super hard, and we have lots of monks and nuns from all over the world coming to a Vita Consecrata Institute. You can canoe with them. They turn over in the river quite a bit. It's really funny. So if you want to do any of that and go on tours to the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in DC and all the shrines in Maryland, and has spent like really intense 6 weeks with us, then after you graduate, after your senior year, you can get your master's in theology in just 1 year of full-time study. So that's also an option for those of you who think that might be a detour that you might be interested in. Or if you were like in ministry or anything like that, that's definitely something for you to consider. So last thing I want to say is that Christendom College, the graduate school in particular, was born out of a response to the spirit of dissent that gripped the church in the wake of the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council was a tremendous gift to the church, but it has been woefully misinterpreted, as we all know, and people have taken terrible liberties with it in its wake. For example, Humanae Vitae and the teaching on contraception has been a center point of dissent and so on. It was precisely in response to that Monsignor Kivane, having been fired from CUA for resisting the dissenters, this is why we were founded. This is what we are all about. So we do not go either to the right or to the left. We teach what the church teaches. And so if you want to get the straight dope on theology and philosophy for that matter, please come to us. All right. So that's all I got. Unless there are any questions. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit how the Christendom at work, what it looks like?
Absolutely. So the Christendom at project is 6 courses that are taken sequentially. This past semester we did early Christian literature. We're doing it right now here at the Newman Center, and then next year it's going to be the Bible and so on. And so it goes through 6 courses, 1 course per semester, and if you complete all 6, you get a certificate from Christendom Graduate School. And the courses are all online, and there is a group aspect to it that Augustine runs for us here on campus. So you get to get together with the students and have discussions about what you're learning in the class. And what's interesting about the courses is that they are really condensed surveys. So instead of like going into the nitty-gritty of one particular thing, like a lot of our graduate courses do, these are really robust surveys that give you what you need and not much more. So for example, early Christian literature that we're doing right now is a tour de force of patristics, right? Then next semester we do the Bible. That's not going to be your regular Bible course. Okay, here's the Old Testament and here's the New Testament, and they were written a long time ago. This is going to be really important stuff that'll help you read the Bible like a Catholic and defend the Catholic reading of the Bible against everybody who says otherwise. The critics from the secular world who say none of it is true and historical and it's all nonsense, and our Protestant brothers and sisters who will read into it all sorts of wild ideas, okay? So that's the Bible, and so on. And that's how all 6 of them work. There's a philosophy one, there's a moral theology one, there's one on the liturgy, divine worship in the Catholic Church. And these are the things that are offered in a sequential manner to kind of give you formation that you cannot otherwise get at a secular campus at the academic level. Yep.
And it's a 2-hour-a-week online,
right,
plus an optional group meeting.
That's exactly right. Yeah, 2 hours of class time, quite a bit of reading, and then the 1 hour optional in the group setting to discuss what you're reading and writing. So, yeah. Sir. Right, Father. What is the current student part of this? $195 per course. $195. Yeah. So sweet deal.
$195 like
Mhm.
first
semester.
First semester. What does that cost originally?
1,040. It's a big discount. That's right. Yeah. So I'm telling you, it's a really good deal. It's being given away as part of this project. So, yeah, and you can do it for credit. That's the cool part. You can get academic credit that Platteville, we are led to believe, will accept. So, right, yeah, right. We have an email and everything. I'm sure. Right. Any other questions? Anything else? Okay, awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me here. It is an honor to be here on campus with you. And yeah, God bless you in all you do. Stay in it. Right. Thank you.